Welcome to FinTech Confidential, bringing you the people, tech, and companies that change how you pay and get paid. Today, we have the amazing Scarlett Sieber here with us. She's the Chief Strategy and Growth Officer at Money 2020.
What makes Money 2020 so special is that there are moments here that happen nowhere else. So how do I make that moment special for other people? And hence the concept came up. I've been an athlete most of my life, and something that is really consistent about that is camaraderie, passion, vision, and like competition. I love competition, and I love high pressure situations. Embedded finance will still be a big topic. The way and applications of which we've talked about to this point might have shifted, but financial services, fintech as a whole is going to get a lot bigger. The things you talked about earlier with data, people getting more excited about it. We're going to see a lot of other big brands becoming part of the natural fintech ecosystem. So we have companies like Databricks. We have companies, obviously we talked about NVIDIA, but we've got, this is a bit more cloud, but not just cloud. You got all, like the IBMs, the Microsofts, the Googles, the tech companies, and the next one, like the Databricks. We got OpenAI a lot. We got Anthropic. So we have this world coming into our world. Get very comfortable with being uncomfortable and know what the unique thing that you have is that no one else has.
Hey, Ted Huff here. Ever thought about how you could streamline your application and underwriting process? Well, let me introduce you to Under. Why keep using the outdated methods of PDFs when you can digitize them effortlessly? All you gotta do is upload the PDF, send it out for digital signature, and voila, you're set for the digital age. Are you curious how to make that happen? Head over to under.io/FTC and get started for free. It's really that simple. Hi, I'm your host, Ted Huff, and welcome to FinTech Confidential series, Leaders One-on-One, where we sit down with FinTech leaders to learn about what drives their passion, their stories, and their leadership guidance. Today, we have the amazing Scarlett Sieber here with us. She's the Chief Strategy and Growth Officer at Money 2020. She's been at the forefront of some of the biggest conversations in FinTech. Scarlett's career includes roles at top organizations like BBVA and Opus Bank, where she's driven strategic initiatives and worked on key FinTech projects. But here's something you might not know about Scarlett. She also advises NASA. Now, so I know what you're thinking. She helps shape the future of FinTech, and she's also got one eye on the stars. Well, I'm not saying she literally is sending FinTech to space, but she's pretty close. Beyond her impressive background, Scarlett has a very unique ability to simplify complex topics and make them accessible for everyone. Whether she's guiding startups with major players or she's driving real change in the way that we think about money and financial services. Now, there is a really funny story on how I actually officially met Scarlett, and anyone that knows her knows that she has a love of really cool kicks. And what she had done last year is she had made a post on LinkedIn asking people to share what sneakers they were going to bring to Money 2020. And as you can probably already tell, I was the winner, and wow, what a night celebrating the 50th anniversary of hip hop with a hip hop legend. Scarlett, I'm dying to know, what is the story behind you deciding to do that sort of a contest and bring somebody in?
Yeah, well, first of all, this was all a major ploy to have this conversation with you right now. So that was the big reason why I did it. No, leading up to, first of all, what a lovely introduction. And, you know, the simple concepts are really just because I have to simplify it for me. So then it's easier to do it for other people. But on the Rev Run thing, one of the things that I do, there's a lot of energy and excitement around our shows every single time. And I get so involved in the day-to-day stuff typically that you kind of have blinders on what's happening to the rest of the world. So usually a few days before the show, sometimes at the show, on the planes, when I can clearly not sleep at night, I'll start scrolling the social channels. And sometimes I used to not do it a contest, but I just scroll the channels, you know, look for the Money 2020 hashtag and see people who are like, first time here, what do I do? Or say whatever it is, and I just start interacting with them directly, and I try to give them cool stuff, whether that be like swag or an experience. And then as I started getting a lot of really positive feedback from that. So I was like, how can I formalize this a little bit? And every year we have something special and unique. And it's what makes Money 2020 so special is that there are moments here that happen nowhere else. So how do I make that moment special for other people? And hence the concept came up. Obviously, as you said, I love kicks. It's kind of my thing. Each show have a different pair. And one of the things that happens at our shows is you do a lot of walking and you get your steps in. So why not talk about that more? And here we are.
So for those of you who don't know about Money 2020, I'm curious what rock you've been living under. But in case you don't know, it is really the place where finance, fintech really gets shaped. And it's not just a once a year event in Vegas like what we talked about, but it's a global gathering that expands all the way into Europe and into Asia every single year. And it has become the leading platform for premium content and experiences like what we just talked about, as well as networking across the entire global money ecosystem. And it's not just for big players, long-standing people in the industry, but it also really is there for startups as well. And it allows you to connect with decision makers and build some lifelong partnerships. And Scarlett is one of the most key people that ensures that real value gets delivered every single time. And she's got a whole team behind her that is just amazing. And I love working with all of them. But before we dive in, Scarlett, I want to, into Money 2020 and all the fun stuff that goes on there, I really want to take people on a journey of really what led you up to Money 2020. Because as I looked at your career trajectory, it was very interesting to watch it go from startup to major corporate, to back to startup, to major corporate, and then landing at Money 2020, all the advisory roles you do. I'm amazed by all of it, but I'm also super curious. It's like, how did it all happen? What was the trigger point, and what was the big piece for you to decide to jump in full bore at Money 2020?
Sure. There's so many questions there. And if we had, 10 hours, we could talk about the whole thing. But I think if you simplify it, I've been an athlete most of my life, and something that is really consistent about that is camaraderie, passion, vision, and like competition. I love competition, and I love high pressure situations. So I don't know. As you asked the question, all of a sudden I started like having these correlations in my mind of how that leads to my career. But in any case, I was an accounting major in college. I've always been really good with numbers, and I did some really weird things as a kid. When there were commercials on the TV, I'd be like counting the letters and dividing it and multiplying it. Anyways, like it's always kind of been my thing. And so when I went to university in New York, accounting was one of the strongest programs within the school that I went to, Fordham in New York. And, the big four were some of the biggest recruiters. So accounting was my background. But anyways, I decided after a few different things, including a stint over in China, that passion was not in accounting. I liked numbers, but accounting is a little bit different. And so I kind of like tripped into startups. It wasn't really my intention. I was applying to all the things, just graduated out of college, had a really solid GPA, but didn't really know what was going to happen from there, and didn't have a bunch of work experience because I was working full time all throughout college to support myself, because I paid for my own college. Actually, I just paid off that last loan in January, so that's a big win. But in any case, startups it just worked out, right time, right place. And I actually started as the office admin for a tech startup, and just fell in love. It was the right team and the right company, right tech. And over 3 years kept growing. I ended up getting co-founder equity and co-founder status, and had some really awesome clients. We had a B2C and a B2B platform. And on the B2C one, I would obviously be monitoring all the people who would come and be like utilizing the tech. It was a data visualization, basically interactive word clouds that made it easy to digest large amounts of content. But anyways, So BBVA was one of many, like all of a sudden you started seeing a thing where there was like 4 or 5, 6 people from BBVA making accounts. And so they reached out to us and said, we really love your technology. You should apply for our startup competition. And we had been in a handful of competitions and won some and didn't win some. So we went and applied and we became a finalist and got flown down to Mexico City. And we did not win, but that year was 2014. Socure, who we all know now, was the winner. The co-founders of Socure were there and pitched against us and won. And I guess looking at where Socure is now versus where Infamous is now, they made a good choice. But Infamous is I still love the company and what we did and what we built. But anyways, that's how I got into financial services, and then full circle. But it was always on the startup side and like the tech side and thinking about how to do things differently, which goes back to some of the vision, camaraderie, like team building and competition stuff. There's a lot out there. So naturally, as a bank, you're competing against other financial institutions, but all of a sudden this wave of fintech is coming and it's, what do we do? And the team that I sat in was looking at whether it was to invest in, acquire, or build ourselves, or of course you could partner as well with tech companies and with fintechs. And it was an awesome opportunity, and had a lot of great learnings. And as you said, did a few other stints along the way, and including management consulting, where I was doing that at scale for many different institutions. And then, Money 2020, I'm seeing this product from every angle. So I used to be a sponsor. I was a speaker. I was an attendee. I was a track chair. And there was just nothing, there's nothing like it. Like I remember it was one of my first conferences that I went to when I got into FinTech with BBVA. That was probably 2015 or 16. And just the feeling and the magnitude and the access was like insane. People that I had been seeing online and never really got a chance to meet were right in front of me standing there. It was incredible. So here I am leading the content, marketing, creative, and product teams, and having a really fun time.
Getting the invite for the first Money 2020, and of course I'm going to forget, I think it was 11 years ago, maybe 12.
Yep, it was 2012.
Yeah, somewhere in there, and I remember getting it and walking in, and it just being one big room. It was just one big room, and then across the hall. And this was at the Aria. Across the hall was an exhibit floor, and some of the biggest names in fintech today were startups that were exhibiting on that floor. And it's just been really cool to see not only Money 2020 grow from being a one room with maybe, I'm going to guess, probably 50 or 60 vendors on the floor to what it is today. I mean, thousands and tens of thousands. I'm from my perspective, it feels like tens of thousands of people attend. There are hundreds and hundreds of exhibitors and sponsors. There's just so much going on. I would love to get your perspective, and maybe you could share with us a couple of the challenges that you faced during different roles as a consultant at BBVA and Opus, and what your interaction was with the fintechs, and how you've brought that over to your experience over at Money 2020 to continue to drive that growth.
So I think there's a few key things that really tie it all together for me. Part of it is, I use the word access intentionally, speaking for myself as a fell into entrepreneurship and then as an entrepreneur. Access matters a lot. So having the right tech, having the right talent, there's also another T in there, which is timing, right? But having access, because even if you have all those things and you are in the middle of nowhere and don't have a network, the ability and your chance to go accelerate growth, get that first big customer, get that next big or even first round of capital is quite hard. And especially the earlier stages you are, because you have a lot less traction then, and it's really more about you and, your background and all that other stuff. So access is the consistency across the board. When I think about the BBVA time, we were looking at companies literally all over the world, but what we were finding in places like Latin America is there was a lot of support from the government. So it was quite easy to get funding in that seed round, but there was a big gap around the post Series A, Series B, because there wasn't enough capital flowing in that area. So again, like some of the best startups could have floundered because they just didn't have the capital to make it. And so it's getting in front of the right people. And the other thing too is like you meet 3 banks, and actually if you would have had that first conversation and you could have iterated your pitch because you were not, maybe you had the right technology but were hitting on the wrong pain point, if you can iterate quickly, go to the next conversation, you know, change your pitch a bit, all of a sudden it becomes a bit more compelling. So I'd say that was one thing that I saw a lot. The other thing is that I realized, because I didn't come from financial services, I didn't have these years and years of background of many people, was because I came from tech, and there were rules and regulations that were true across the board. And sometimes there were specific things on specific countries, but with financial services, every market is like really different. So I was a bit surprised when I would see what felt like an exact copycat of something I had seen from Spain now being over in the UK, or being from Mexico, from the US, but like it actually can work in financial services and in fintech because the rules and regulations are so specific to that geography. So copycat models actually have more of a chance to work here than they do in other industries. So that's another thing that I really saw. But yeah, I'd say those are some of the key things. You know, on the consulting side too, like speaking to these boards, speaking to these CEOs of these banks, typically in the 2 to 20 billion AUM, there was at times a fear of what was coming. There was a distrust and like a disbelief that this stuff was going to really matter. And then sometimes there was like a general, like genuine interest, but it's like, hey, we don't have $1 billion innovation budget like the big banks. Like, what can we do, and how can we actually work with these companies? And how do we make sure that we're pushing forward, because we don't want to be the ones left behind. So there was a lot, like I said, a lot of different emotions there, but really it was like, sometimes they just didn't know it was out there. Like, there's so much, how do we know which was the one to go for? And where do we be smart about where we invest our time and money? And, you know, again, now back to where we are now, that's one of the things that's so powerful about the platform that is Money 2020, because all of those things can happen in a few days. And
you hit on a couple different things, right? So different regions are handled differently. I don't generally call them copycat, but regional specific models. Yeah. That happen a lot of times. You know, you get to see a lot of these different things, especially having Money 2020 Europe. That was earlier Europe and Asia were both earlier this year. We're going to close out the year with the one here in the US. What are some of the major market trends that you've seen this year that are impacting fintech, particularly around compliance, fraud, embedded payments, and how are all of these money movement payments experiences evolving? So I'm going to give you one example that actually kind of adds a point to what we were just talking about. So if I think back to 2015, that was shortly after BBVA acquired Simple Bank, right? Which was one of the first neobanks. MoveIn and Simple Bank, one of the earlier ones, which was, you know, neobank really focused on the customer, can be, you know, anywhere, in this case in the US, but it can be anywhere in the US, and, you know, offer them like really great experiences for them. Anyways, fast forward to this year. So we're in 2024, Chime. And I've talked to Chris, who's the CEO of Chime, a few different times throughout this period. And then shortly after, when Chime really started taking off, maybe around 2019. And like a lot of Chris's inspiration was from seeing what Simple and MoveIn did, and that there was an opportunity there. So they did some of like the heavy lifting early. And it's not that Chime hasn't had their own heavy lifting, but that, you know, whatever the right word is, different iterations. And this is even in the same geography, right? Like the newer iteration of what someone else identified is sometimes where all of a sudden that scale and traction happens. And now, you know, let's see where Chime is today. Like they've grown a lot. They're one of probably arguably the best example of a neobank in the US. And here they are now coming back and having a conversation about that. As you talk about Chime, one of the things that I talk to a lot of the companies, I always remind them, success leaves clues and failures leave lessons. And so if you can follow the clues around the successes and you can learn the lessons from the failures, that will allow you to do exactly what you were talking about, Chris, doing at Chime, is taking that same concept to the next level. And that's, as you were talking through it, like that's something that came to mind that I frequently talk to a lot of the companies I work with.
Each one of our shows has a process that we call a call for content, where anyone can go in and submit what they want to speak about on stage, right? So we get thousands of applications globally around this. If we look at the US in specific, and this was opened April of this year, April to May, I want to say timeframe, almost 20% of all submissions had AI and fraud in there, and not just AI or fraud, AI and fraud together in some way, shape, or form. So that was an interesting data point, because you're talking about some of the things that you're seeing: compliance, fraud, AI. I think two of those three words, 20% of all of our submissions for the US show had those two words in there. It is. It's a lot. So that is like one of those things where we sit back, and that's an indicator for us. I mean, we were going to talk about it anyways, don't get me wrong. It'd be like crazy not to, but just at the scale of how many different types of companies wants to have this conversation, it tells you a whole lot. I mean, also, we can't not talk about the fact that, I mean, our show is always the last week of October. And this year in 2024, we have something else big happening in the beginning of November with what's, the election. And so regulation, I'd say, is something that we've seen. We've had regulation for some time at our shows. We've had the big regulators back when I actually consulted with Money 2020 back in 2019. And during that time, we got the OCC, the FDIC, and the CFPB. And it's like, oh, great, we're going to go to this big main stage thing. And the room was not as packed as you would have expected. Fast forward to 2022, Director Chopra comes, talks about, and actually announced in Vegas at Money 2020 the intentions around 1033. And there was not an empty seat in that space, including some of our biggest CEO FinTech darlings who are on all the Forbes list. We're all sitting there, mouth open, eyes ready to go, like what's going to come. So that's definitely shifted, and we've continued to see that. We had Hester Pierce last year. We got some big names we're about to announce coming for this year as well. So I'd say the role of regulation has never been more important than it is now, and especially again in the U.S., what happens with this election will really pivot where we're going to go as an industry, and we'll certainly be having conversations about that.
Support provided by Skyflow. What if you could build fast but not break privacy? What if you could ensure data privacy, governance, and compliance with just a few API calls? What if you could worry less about PCI requirements while actually improving privacy and security? How much more time would your team have to truly innovate? How much faster could you build and ship new features? How much more powerful could your app be? Skyflow is a zero-trust data privacy vault delivered as an API. Skyflow's radically simple design lets you collect, secure, and tokenize personal information like card data and payment details. And with built-in features like encrypted data analysis and sharing, anonymization, and advanced governance, your days of choosing between data security and data usability are over. Whether you're just concerned with PCI compliance or need to go further to include CCPA, GDPR, SOC 2, and beyond, Skyflow has you covered. What if you could build fast but not break privacy? With Skyflow, you can. Visit skyflowsecure.com today to learn how. And I'm going to go a little bit off tangent here because of you talking about how regulatory went from being something that people are like, oh yeah, that's kind of neat, and maybe the chief compliance officer would peek their head in, or maybe one of the analysts would show up for it, to now where you see founders showing up, you see CTOs showing up to these conversations. Do you think it might have something to do with enforcement of the regulatory enforcement that has been going on that feels very subjective in the interpretation?
If you look back a decade ago, there has been a ton of shifts, and at the same time, really not a lot at all. So, but what I would say is what we have seen is more of a technology is outpacing and going at a quicker acceleration than the rules around them. And some of that is really good because we're doing things that customers and consumers want, whether that be a small business or an end consumer. But at the same point in time, we need to make sure that's done safely. And so things like crypto have obviously had a huge impact on that. But I mean, even like, so let's use a different example. If we, we don't need to go too down the rabbit hole with this, but what happened earlier this year with Synapse and Evolve Bank and Trust. So the ex-chairman of the FDIC, Yelena McWilliams, she's now at a law firm. She was appointed the trustee of that case to go and basically find the money, right? So she's coming back to Vegas this year, and she and I are going to have a fireside chat about your original point of like, why are all of a sudden the founders listening? It's going to be geared specifically for founders around, here's what you need to know when you're thinking about BaaS and stuff like that, where let's just say that there's been a lot of attention from the startups and a lot of excitement about going to see this, because this individual was directly responsible for helping to find what happened here. And she's going to come give you that guidance. So I just think there's a lot more competition. There's a lot more focus here. There was a bit of a like, let's wait and see. Are fintechs actually going to like eat the world? Remember what I was talking to you about when I was going and talking to all these CEOs and boards is it a competition? Is it actually going to touch us? And I think what we've seen now is in 2024, a lot more fintechs and banks are A, working together, but B, they're here to stay, and they're actually taking a pretty foundational piece of that pie for some of these big institutions. And so that's why I think regulation has been more front and center than in the past, because they have to.
Well, and it's funny you bring up the BaaS piece of it, because right now a number of clients that I work with are very focused on how do I deliver a bank-like experience without being forced into the legacy core functions of a financial institution's core, and trying to figure out how do we do that. There are a couple that I've worked with that were involved in the case that you were just talking about. But there are also others that are going on, and it's been really interesting to see after the last two banking as a service big hits, as I would call them, that it feels like there's a reset that's getting ready to happen, it's already happening, but I don't think we're going to really see the reset, what the effects of that reset button are, probably for another 10 to 12 months. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see that conversation, that fireside chat with you later this year. I do want to dive into, because you touched on it just a little bit, the fintechs, and I look at them as the non-traditional financial players in the market versus the financial institutions. I've never really seen them, and I'm kind of an odd duck probably in this. I've never seen them going against each other. I've always seen them as trying to figure out how do they partner, how do they work together, how do they deliver a better product. But what are you seeing as far as the role of the institutions and investors and the interest from some of these larger players in startups at Money 2020?
Yeah. So just to answer the part about the competition piece, speaking as let me put my banker hat on for a little bit. I definitely saw it. So, whether it be through my clients or directly in any of the institutions, I've worked at 3 different banks, any institutions that I've worked at, where, you look at your analysis, you look at your average deposit amount, you look at your average amount of loans in general, and then also the amount of loans as an example. And then if you are the primary account, so if you're the one, let's just use a consumer example, you're the one where they get their direct deposit into, you obviously get a look at transactions of where money is coming and going. And you could see consumers using third-party fintechs for loans. And you could see, because you see payments going out, and that could be for, their business or whatever, like that could, buying a car or anything else, instead of using what they would typically use with us, they'd go and use a third party. So we just see money leaving our account and not money coming back in. So that definitely was a big thing. To your question around the beauty in what the platform provides is that the collective ecosystem is there. So whether you are an investor, an early stage startup, a late stage startup, the CEO of a mid-sized bank, the EVP of payments or lending at one of the top 5 banks or whatever else. Because the collective ecosystem is there, you can get a lot done in one place. And so part of it is getting, I weirdly go back to psychology. It's like, what are you motivated by? What are you trying to do? So if you are, and actually Tina and I had this conversation today because she was pitching me, as she does, what she was thinking about for the next press release that she wanted to talk about. And it was, she sat back as we were going through some of the speakers and she was like, we have this person, this person, this person, all really big names, big names before, but have jumped on with very big titles at new companies. And they're all choosing Money 2020 as the platform to basically tell the world, boom, I'm here. And it's not just the big banks. Yes, it's that for sure. So some of the big banks, big new jobs, first time speaking, some of the big payment providers, first time coming and speaking ever in the United States. I wonder why that would happen. Maybe they're trying to move more of their business into the US. But then on the opposite side, so like last year, Jeremy Balkin announced Today Pay in Vegas. So he was in stealth for about 8 months and then came and told the world, hey, like he built up a lot of suspense as he does, and then made a big, he's awesome. And he came and made the announcement that he was, coming out of stealth at Money 2020. Same thing just happened in June in Europe with Megan Kaywood Cooper, American darling, FinTech darling over in the UK now, but that she came out of stealth mode with her, ironic or not ironic at all, her new startup, Kaywood, on Wealth Tech. So in any case, like I said, totally different profiles, totally different people and different goals. Some of them is about announcing their company. Some of it is about announcing themselves. That's going to better their company. But in any case, they have the same purpose, which is about really raising that profile. This
gives an opportunity as a jump off point for companies in their fundraising. If they have investors that are on the fence of deciding, hey, should we invest? Should we not invest? I think this is a good point for them to really get to know not only the company, but the market reaction to what the company says at the event. And the one that comes to mind, and you and I talked about this prior to today, but Nala, $40 million raise a month or two after Money 2020 Europe. So that it, like there was stuff on the fence there that just came on over to make that happen.
Ben is awesome. Actually, he what was so cool about that one too is one of the things that Tina, I keep using as if everyone knows who Tina is. She's our global head of PR, but
everybody should know Tina.
Everyone should know Tina. She is the other 6'+ blonde that is also Swedish, but she's actually Swedish, as in she has a Swedish accent, not like me, who's Americanized Swede. But in any case, that's the only reason she's here is because we're Swedishness. But Nala was one of the finalists who presented during our press lunch that we had for a handful of startups that we selected and put in front of the press. So again, you don't know. I'm sure obviously these things don't happen in an instant, and these deals are being worked out a bit ahead of time. But I would imagine that the amplification did not hurt, to put it as mildly as possible, and that certainly happens all the time. And you go in with an objective. Let's say you are a startup of, I want to meet with XYZ investors and hopefully get that fundraise, which of course is the goal. And we try to help facilitate that in as many ways as we can. But equally, what we find a lot of times too is all of a sudden that may be the goal, but then you actually just found your back end partner for da-da-da-da-da, or your front end partner for this or this or that. So that is the cool part too, is even if there is quite a specific objective, because the ecosystem is there, all these things that might not have been your number one or number two goal end up happening naturally in response to that as well.
How you see the different ecosystems differ across North America, Europe, Asia. I know you keep an eye on Africa, Latin America, Oceania as well. These different markets are different levels of maturity. They have different regulations. Help me understand where you're seeing some differences and maybe a few similarities between all of them that are driving success of FinTech.
Cross-border payments is relevant across all of them.
Across all the borders, yeah.
across all the borders. Cross-border payments matters, but
as default rates continue to rise and margins compress in lending, financial organizations are searching for solutions to combine that operational efficiency with innovation. Look no further, as LoanPro allows lenders to enhance their origination, servicing, collections, and payments using the foundation of a modern lending core. Check out LoanPro.io to learn more about how over 600 financial organizations have modernized their tech stack with LoanPro.
Asia specifically, there was a real focus on that. And I don't know the exact stat off the top of my head, but when I was talking to you about that 20% AI and fraud for Vegas, cross-border was a significant percentage of the inbound applications for Asia. If you think about the differences, open banking is a really good example, right? Where I would say a lot of my European team and the European ecosystem, it feels, and they are quite advanced when it comes to open banking. And then you have what's happening here in the US, and we talked a little bit about that. And of course, the CFPB has already announced they're going to come out with the closed circle of 1033 in October. So we'll see what happens around that. But if you then go over to Asia, there were conversations about open banking as well, but it was at definitely of a different level than what we would be hearing at the other shows. I would say also the super apps, again, we've done that across all the three shows. It's not the crowd pleaser that it is in Asia. Like that content really resonates there. And when we have conversations about super apps, let's just put it like this. We didn't have one conversation about super apps. We had like 10. And sometimes we focused on a specific geo, like the Philippines. Sometimes we went more broad, brought in outside industries in. But that really, really resonated there. So those are probably the two biggest that come to mind. Another one, of course, is AI, but like it was just like everyone talked about big data. It's like that's just like the word. We really debate over structuring the content because on the one hand, there's a lot of content and that team spends so long putting together the right combination of people and ideas and stories. But sometimes I can imagine when you're looking at hundreds of sessions, it can feel quite hard to find what you want. So we always go back and forth and debate, like, should this be the thing on AI or should AI live across everything? Should this? So we've had somewhat of a balance. So like in Vegas, we actually have a dedicated summit on Sunday, and it's actually in partnership with NVIDIA, who has done this with us for 2 years running now across the US and Europe.
Last year's was really, really good.
It's going to be good this year too. It's NVIDIA and Oracle this year, but I mean, it's working, right? Like it says something when the company that's valued at the most probably in the world right now is using Money 2020 as that partner for FinTech and AI. So in any case, that's going to be really interesting, and it's going to be dedicated to that. But then naturally, it'll be happening across the show. The other thing, as we talked about a second ago on like open banking, how do we make that applicable? Because earlier we talked about the CEO of that mid-tier bank or a startup founder or someone else, right? They all care about open banking, but their level of care and knowledge and interest varies vastly. So what we tried to do and what we are doing this year is we are basing it based off of level, right? So there's 101, 201, and 301. So you know what's going, you just heard about it, you want to know a little bit more. Let's say, you're someone who's outside of financial services, just got in here or whatever else. The 101 is there, and it's definitely more high level, general, like base. Anyway, so the point is, open banking is being talked about, but to what degree depends on which level you go into. So we're starting to do more testing on things like that to make sure that we're having the right content for the right audience. Because you go and we really listen to feedback from our customers, because that's the reason why we do this stuff, right? So you'll have a same session, one person will be like, that was so general and it provided me nothing. The other person says, that was the best thing I've ever heard. It's so hard to get it right. So we're trying to structure it in certain ways.
How you were talking about the AI piece of it. Do we make it its own? Do we blend it in? And I was just talking to a startup founder yesterday or the day before, just within the last couple of days. They all blend together, as you know. But we were just talking about it, and it's been really interesting how there have been so few companies that truly have built at least in FinTech, it feels this way, that have truly built an FinTech AI company. AI has felt more like a a feature that is enhancing the products and services that are out in the marketplace. And that's something that actually was quite a surprise for me, because I figured that there would be companies that would be building the tools, the AI specific tools, to take to each one of these. And traditionally in my mind, I was thinking the institutional players or the larger players that wanted to try AI before they dove all the way into the deep end of the pool, but didn't want to blend it in. So if it didn't go well, they could jettison it really, really quick. And that's just kind of where I was thinking, but I noticed that it's now, over the last year, really become an integral part into a lot of the products and services. And we've gotten beyond the machine learning and the pattern matching and a whole bunch of other stuff. But that's where my brain was going when you were talking about trying to make that decision. And I'm just seeing the market kind of align with the way you're describing the tracks.
So we have companies like Databricks. We have companies, obviously we talked about NVIDIA, but we've got, this is a bit more cloud, but not just cloud. You got all, like the IBMs, the Microsofts, the Googles, the tech companies, and the next one, like the Databricks. We got OpenAI a lot. We got Anthropic. So we have this world coming into our world, which is quite interesting. And the co-founder of Anthropic, Danielle, is keynoting this year and talking about safe AI and some of their new products as it relates to that. But then on the other side, as you said, so if you think about the incumbent position for a second, they are trying this to different degrees. Sometimes they buy it, but we talked about the $1 billion innovation budgets, but a lot of it is the stuff that you or I probably wouldn't see because it's on the back end stuff, right? So one of the things that you see is, how do you make all the things that happen behind closed doors more efficient? And it's the stuff that's not sexy, no one really wants to talk about, but that's where I've seen a lot of the investment going towards. Yes, some of it will be the front customer facing stuff like the chat bots, but most of it, and so you as the receiver of said product could feel a bit of a different, and maybe the chatbots are actually a little better where you don't want to like throw your computer out the window because you just want to talk to a human. But a lot of it is being focused on some of the stuff on the back end. And even in Europe in June, the CTO, and I think his exact title was CTO of AI for ING, was doing just that, was talking about how they were leveraging AI today in their call centers. And so there's things like that that are already happening, but it's just not as talked about because, quite frankly, press don't find it that interesting because the stuff that's happening behind closed doors is like infrastructure and things like that.
Well, and I spend a lot of time in the infrastructure with folks, so I'm always looking for, you talked about the big names that we all know and hear about in the press every day that participate in that. And I'm hoping that there is a name that we don't know on a regular basis. It's not a household name at this point within FinTech that shows up to be very focused on serving the financial services community and not being a generalized product that has figured out how to sort of serve the community. And I think that's the piece, that is the thing that I'm waiting to see somebody become that beacon within financial services. And maybe they're there and I just haven't met them yet, but I haven't seen somebody that takes on an OpenAI or an Anthropic level role in the space.
Yeah, maybe I'll meet them in Vegas in a few weeks. We'll see. There's definitely an opportunity there. It made me think about something that we started talking about a little bit earlier, but kind of the role of embedded finance and all this. So you talked about the idea of kind of being created by FinTech for FinTech versus something that's created more generally, and then they see a use case or an application in financial services and try to like tailor it for the market, because that's not just an AI thing. That's kind of across the board, where we're seeing products, services that maybe were really specific for a different vertical. And then as they have come to quite heavy absorption of that industry, they move over to financial services. So that's not just an AI thing. That's like across the board. We see a lot of that with like identity, a few other places where people have done it really well for a different industry. So why not here? And sometimes it really works, and we've seen some good traction there. But it's interesting, like, who's going to win that? Is it the ones that are creating it for FinTech by FinTech, or is it the ones who are coming in who have maybe invested a lot more already and just have to do a bit of tweaking? We'll see what happens.
I'm always hopeful for the FUBU to happen for us, by us. That's what I'm always hoping that happens. And there are a couple that have kind of taken a trajectory that you talked about. One right now is rumored to being sold to Visa right now. The folks, David and team over at Future Space, they started off as just being a behavioral analytics company, then realized, hey, there's a lot more data in payments. There's a lot more data over here for us to deal with, and decided that they were just going to say, hey, this is the route that we're going to go. And I mean, I would be okay with that too, is making that choice, but I still struggle with the general purpose and then like that single use case that just seems to look like it could make a bunch of money. But as we talk about this transition and maybe meeting somebody at Money 2020, with the way that it's structured, with all of the content, with all of the people, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of content. There's a lot of events. There's a lot of great experiences. How are you helping, and what suggestions would you have to facilitate these connections between the decision makers, C-suite executives, founders, and just people that are trying to drive their business forward at Money 2020? Yes,
you are right. There is a lot. That the power is that there is a lot, but that is also, especially for someone who has not been before, it can feel like a lot. So a few things. If you talked a little bit about connections and networking. So we've done something quite intentional and specific around that. So as mentioned to you earlier, we spent a lot of time listening to our customers. I have opinions. My team has opinions. We hired experts in specific verticals, so I trust their expertise. That doesn't mean I don't want to go validate with customers. So one of the things that we've seen that has started to transition a bit is focused time and energy. So one thing that we're starting and trialing this year in Vegas is a dedicated time for meetings. This is not just something that's happening at other financial services conferences. This is happening at conferences across the world. I am not a conference expert. I'm not an events expert. I know FinTech, but we're seeing this more and more of a demand, and our customers are asking for this as well. So on Sunday, we have a dedicated time just for meetings. One of the things that's really important about that is, as you said, so it's quite logistically about nothing else is going on. So people aren't going to be competing and saying, oh, but I can't because I have this or I have that or whatever else. It's just that. The other thing is the profiling of doing that, because as we said, it's a lot, but what you don't know everyone who's there, but what you do know is what skill sets, expertise, and value adds that you or your company brings. And you do know that what you're looking for on their side. So if you tell us that information, super quick to do, we're going to match you with the right people. So that's number one, which I think will be a big help this year, because before you ever walk on the showroom floor Monday morning, you should already have up to 6 meetings. We'll see what the final number ends up being, but you'll definitely have some guaranteed meetings before you ever walk on the showroom floor, as kind of like a nice taste before you build out your relationship for the rest of the days. 2 is we of course have what we've had for years, which is the Connect app, or Money 2020 Connect app, which we do also give you the power to do the work yourself and figure out what you want, because people also really love that. They don't want everything being dictated to them. Again, from what we've seen, they want to have the ability to do what they want as well. So with us, we're trying to give the option to do both, where we will do some of it for you, give us a little bit more information of who you want and why you want them and what you offer, and then we'll give that for you. And then equally, if Ted knows that he wants to go see Scarlett and see Tanya and see everyone else who had the cool kicks from the Rev Run moment, he can find that directly in the app and go book meetings with them and do that there. The other thing that we're doing is back to psychology, which is around interests. So Ted and Scarlett both really care about kicks and hip hop. If when we do our industry night events, like the 50 years of hip hop, we're about to announce our industry night event, I have a feeling you're going to enjoy it almost as much, if not as much as the one last year. Similar thing, right? So you're bringing people together, not necessarily because buyer seller, we need to connect here, but we're both in fintech and we both have a passion for XYZ, then all of a sudden business could be done on the other side of that. So that's the other thing where we try to use the experiences as the platform to have conversations with different people. So women in fintech, focus on credit unions, whatever. We have that embedded throughout the day as well. So we have like meetups focused on specific topics where people who care about that come together, and you don't know the output. Obviously there's stuff that we can track, stuff that we can't, but that's the intention. So to the meetings question, I'd say those three things. One thing that you kind of covered overarchingly in all of that is go with a plan. Like, you've got to go with a plan. Don't just show up and hope that serendipity fills in everything, because that very quickly could lead to just feeling underwhelmed or overwhelmed, depending on which direction you take it from. But definitely have a plan to who and what and where you want to be, and what you want to get out of it, and have that plan ahead of time. I love the idea of you guys, focusing on downtime. I think last year was one of the first years I actually had time between my meetings and between the things. And I very intentionally did that. The amount of calmness that it gave me during that crazy event was substantial, but it also forced me to figure out who were the most important people for me to talk to, and why. And I think that was a really, really big thing for me as well. And I'm carrying it over again this year. I'm very happy you said that, because it reminded me that I didn't answer the second part of your question, but also you talked about this quiet space. So one of the other things, likely not going to see in Vegas, but we'll definitely see by Asia 25, is a real focus on wellness as well. So that can be incorporated in a myriad of ways. We already do that through food and different things like that, but through moments, because it's exactly that. And sometimes there is such an overstimulation that we need time to take a step back. So we're incorporating wellness in we've got a creative team who are just like absolute geniuses with this stuff. And they're actually going to walk me through some of the briefs next week. We really care about that. But I think that what you said about being prepared is really important I think about it in three ways, and I'm chunking it up into time. So it's it's you get out what you put in, and 100%, it's not one example, to like dozens, if not hundreds of examples of people that we talk to. When you put the work in ahead of time, the output is way more worth it. There are people we've seen last year who, this is when we just had the Connect app, who the sales team had already hit their meeting goals like before ever showing up in Vegas, because they did such the work earlier. So there's stuff like that. But then, as you said, it's on site. So it is about being smart about how you allocate your time, but then also putting that downtime in, whether that is to have a mental break, reset, whether that is to get a little bit of exercise in, or whether that is to just like scroll the floor. And because you don't like, that's where that strategic serendipity can happen, where it's like you gave your time, you gave yourself the space because you don't know, and you just might walk into that person. And then the third part that I talk about this a lot with the Rise Up and Amplify cohorts that we have is the follow through. And I'd say that's the other side that people are not super strong on, and myself included, by the way, because I am so exhausted afterwards. But it is those connections and those conversations and following up, but also adding a little bit of specificity in it. So it's, oh, great to see you in Vegas, doesn't tell me jack. It's like, hey, Ted, loved the conversation. I hoped you loved Rev Run as much as I did, blah, 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 blah. And then like, there's that next level connection that's made. And that's how business actually gets done, because some people do really well on 1 and 2 and completely forget 3, or they wait a month and people's heads are like, who was that again? What happened? And so that quick follow through is like a really important step of that process as well. It's always interesting. It's funny. It's like, great to see you in Vegas. I always love when I get those emails, because I can almost guarantee that I didn't actually see that person in 100%. Vegas. 100%. It's like I actually wasn't in Vegas this year, but thank you. Oh, well, hey, so we've come to that part of the episode that I love to ask everybody, and believe it or not, I've asked it so many times that I have been gifted this nice little crystal ball for you to look into. And I want you to look forward the next 5 to 10 years, look into the crystal ball, look forward into the next 5 to 10 years. And what do you think will have happened in FinTech
And how do you see the industry evolving over that time?
Embedded finance will still be a big topic. The way and applications of which we've talked about to this point might have shifted, but financial services, fintech as a whole is going to get a lot bigger. The things you talked about earlier with data, people getting more excited about it, we're going to see a lot of other big brands becoming part of the natural fintech ecosystem.
You know, you talked about 20% of it coming from compliance AI things. I still remember back 2019 when it was crypto, blockchain, everything, everywhere. It's calmed down quite a bit, but do you see it playing a big, small, or no part in the growth of fintech and embedded finance?
For doing the crystal ball 5 years, I'd say small. There's still a lot to be determined on exactly how. I mean, the technology piece of it is very interesting. And there's 5 years is not far enough away for us to see big, is my opinion. Mm-hmm. It's gonna take longer than that. And will it hit or not? I'm not exactly sure, but we definitely won't have an answer in the next 5 years. We'll have comings and goings. And it's interesting because you talked about 2019 and even into 2021, like there was still a lot of talk about crypto, but some of those same companies still are actively involved and come to the show, but they're now focusing on the technology and how it's helping other parts of financial services. So yeah, short answer is small, is what I would say.
And the last question of today, if you were to give a startup founder one piece of advice in one sentence, and it's the only piece of advice they will ever get to use, what would it be?
Get very comfortable with being uncomfortable and know what the unique thing that you have is that no one else has.
So when you say uncomfortable and you say unique, how do I know that my discomfort is the right kind of discomfort? And how do I know that I'm truly unique?
The second part, how do you know that you're unique or your idea or your skill set is unique? You talk to other people and think about things. We all have these moments, right? Where you sit there and there's times where you're like baffled and like, oh my God, I wish I thought of that. Or wow, that person is so this or so that. Then you take a step back and think there's other meetings where you're like, oh my God, clearly that was obvious. I saw that 6 months ago. And there starts to become a pattern. And it's not necessarily, it could even be a type of intelligence. Maybe it's emotional intelligence, whatever it is, like that could be your unique skill set. So it's just, if you sit back and reflect, think about the things where there might be a bit of a pattern of, I knew that, I already did that, or wow, I can't believe they're just getting to this. You can start getting a little bit more into it. Also, external validation certainly helps. If there's consistently the thing where, oh, you're so good at, or wow, that helps. On the first part, how do you know when you're being uncomfortable? I think you specifically asked about startup founders. You are going to be pitching your behind off all day, every day to customers, to investors, to talent. So it's no matter what, whether you are an expert at any of these things or an expert salesperson, typically the CEO and founder is not necessarily the expert salesperson. Not that they had that as their background, they could, but not necessarily. That is a really hard thing to do. And I genuinely believe that there is a handful of incredible founders and incredible companies who have not seen the light of day because the founders haven't got over that part to the degree that they need to. So I think that can be a really big game changer.
That's how I know that I'm getting uncomfortable when I'm like, I really don't want to do this, but I got to get it done, and then push through it. So it's really true. It's true. That balance is hard and you just got to push through, and when hard things happen, you grow, right? You grow mentally, and that is a huge feat, and you use that for the rest of your life. Scarlett, thank you so much. I'm just thinking through. I mean, you've given us advice on how to look at the market, how to make the most of our 2020 experience, what's going on across the globe in fintech. And last but not least, you left us with a fantastic gem for the fintech founders. I really appreciate you taking the time out to sit down with us today. I thank you for having me here. This has been a delightful conversation. We can go have a disco afterwards. Good energy, good vibes, and we could do this again for another 3 hours. Always open for it. So, well, that does it for another episode of FinTech Confidential's Leaders One-on-One series. If you've made it this far, be sure to go ahead, like, subscribe, share, make sure that everybody understands what's going on in FinTech. And as always, keep moving forward. As we wrap up today's episode, I've got one last thing for you. If you're in the trenches fighting fraud and financial crime, you know it's a complex battlefield. That's where Hawk's AI tools for real-time payment screening, AML, transaction monitoring, and dynamic customer risk rating come into play. These aren't just buzzwords, they're game changers designed to make your compliance more effective and less of a headache. Imagine slashing through false positives with precision and giving your compliance strategy the edge it needs. Head on over to GetHawkAI.com to sign up for a demo and discover how their platform can revolutionize how you fight fraud and financial crime.
This has been a production of DD3 Media, with all rights reserved. This is provided for informational purposes only. It is not offered or intended to be used as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. We strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, but will not be responsible for any missing facts or inaccurate information. You comply and understand that you should use any of this information at your own risk. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile financial assets, so research and make your own financial decisions.